Get free from people.
The day that you allow the opinions of the outside world to dictate the way you feel about yourself, it is the beginning of the end of you living a blessed and self-loving, secure life. Love yourself. Love yourself. Believe in yourself, independent of the validation of the world. Have opinions and feelings about yourself, independent of the feedback. Why you gotta have somebody calling you beautiful every day in order for you to feel beautiful? Do you believe that you're beautiful? Or do you only believe you're beautiful when other people say that you're beautiful? I'm just asking. Self-love is the cure to self-hate. If you make it to the end of this video, I want you to write, self-love is the cure to self-hate. These are the type of qualities that I'm going and have been instilling in my daughter. There is no man that you could ever meet, Shayla, that can make you feel more amazing than what you're supposed to feel about yourself. Nobody wants to be alone. But if you show up empty, as an empty shell, and you're expecting this man to fulfill you and fill you up with all of the love that doesn't exist, because as soon as he leaves, you're depleted, you're empty, and you have nothing left for yourself again. Never rely or depend on anybody to fulfill your heart. I love me even if you stop loving me. I'm amazing when you don't think I'm amazing. You can say the nastiest, meanest, evilest shit that you could ever conjure up. It will never change the way I feel about myself. I'm telling you, that's the way I live my life. That's how I feel about me.
Very powerful when you can say, I like who I am. I feel good about myself. I'm proud of who God made me to be. Most people can't do this. They say, I would feel good about myself if I didn't have these weaknesses. I would be happy with who I am if I was a better parent, if I wasn't so jealous, if I was more patient. I would hold my head up high if I hadn't made these mistakes. There will always be some reason why you shouldn't feel good about who you are. The accuser will make sure to remind you of something that you're not doing right, some way that you failed. If you're going to live in victory, you have to put your foot down and say, that's it. I'm done being against myself.
The day that you start living your life according to everybody else's opinion is the beginning of the end. Most of y'all don't actually know your self-worth. You don't know your self-value. So you're like a vulnerable little child. You're shaking, and it's like, everybody loves me this week, so I love me this week. Next week, it drops. So now you're running around insecure and not loving yourself, sad and depressed, based on the feedback, the responses, and the energy that the rest of the world is giving you. If you allow your self-worth to be based on what other people think of you, is the beginning of the end. I love me. So the day that you decide to stop loving me, I'm not gonna love myself any less. I believe in me. If you stop believing in me, I'm not gonna believe in myself any less. If you believe that I'm irrelevant and that I don't mean anything to the world, that no one is checking for me, because you think or believe that about me, it doesn't mean that I'm gonna believe it about myself.
You spend your life performing for a crowd, it'll kill you. And you're like, I'm good. I'm not a singer. I don't perform for people. It's gotten much deeper than that now. It's the feeling that we get when we start offering ourselves up in a form that is more impressive to people, but is not authentic to us. Is the mode that we all get tempted to get into when we start trying to bring a version of ourselves to a situation that we think will make a good impression. Sometimes you can really be functioning in a role, but deep down feel like you are not really capable and you are not really worthy of the role. And so when people give you a compliment, you can't even receive it because it feels like they're talking about somebody else, because you know so much about yourself that you explain away your strengths and wallow in your weaknesses. It's called imposter syndrome or fraudulence complex.
That peace that we're after lies somewhere beyond personality, beyond the perception of others, beyond invention and disguise, even beyond effort itself. Your need for acceptance can make you invisible in this world. Don't let anything stand in the way of the light that shines through this form. Risk being seen in all of your glory. Our eyes are not viewers, they're also projectors that are running a second story over the picture that we see in front of us all the time. Fear is writing that script, and the working title is, I'll Never Be Enough. And don't worry if you miss your cue, because there's always doors opening. They keep opening. And when I say life doesn't happen to you, it happens for you, I'm just making a conscious choice to perceive challenges as something beneficial so that I can deal with them in the most productive way. You'll come up with your own style. That's part of the fun. Oh, and why not take a chance on faith as well?
You can protect yourself from negativity. And that's what stops most people, negative thoughts. You can coat your mind from negativity. It's a real simple exercise to do. I do it every morning before I walk out the door. So I walk out as a positive person. You know, I get tired sometimes. That's different from being negative. But to coach your mind from negativity is with one simple thing, gratitude. Gratitude erases negativity. If you wake up in the morning and you start having negative thoughts, man, this ain't my day. I'm tripping, I just don't feel myself. Every time you feel, in the middle of the day, if you feel yourself doing that, stop, just stop for a second and start going over in your mind everything you have to be grateful for. Not everything you want, everything you already have, because what you have is substantial. The fact that you woke up, that's another blessing. The fact that you can see, think, reason, that's another blessing. The fact that you have an opportunity to get it right is another blessing. The fact that you have any measure of health, that's another blessing. And I'm just talking to you, I don't even know you. I could give you 50 things you ought to be grateful for right now. I don't even know you. Start coating your mind with gratitude. It'll change everything for you.
It's something in me that says, I need to do this. So that's the first voice. But we've trained ourselves to ignore this voice and listen to the second voice that I believe is a collection of the average society. It's what we learned. It's the practical voice, the should voice. Whenever you say I should do, where are you getting that from? What society says. Well, we forget society's kind of crazy. There's a lot of unhappy people there, a lot of addictions, a lot of stuckness. It's like, why are we using them as the bellwether that we should get our advice from, right? So this first voice goes, I think we should do this. And we go right to this voice that says why we shouldn't. So for instance, there's many people that feel guilty about something. If you actually go to your heart, you can understand at a true level why you could have done something like that. Everyone can. But what causes our pain is trying to get society to understand why we did something. But the collective society isn't at a consciousness where they've forgiven themselves for anything. So there's a lot of judgment you'll look at in yourself if you look at yourself through society's eyes.
The labor, the work. Some people go for affirmations, but see that I do believe in affirmations, but here's the key on affirmations, and that is to affirm the truth. Affirm the truth. If you're broke, best thing to affirm is, I am broke. You put that up on the refrigerator where you can see it every day. It'll drive you to sign up for a class to learn a skill so that this doesn't happen anymore. Now, if that doesn't do it, reaffirm and put this up there. I'm 40th broke. That's a lot more alarming. Something might be wrong with your philosophy, your policy, your plan, and your strategy. So, affirm, yes, but always affirm the truth. Here's what the old prophet said. The truth will set you free. Now, here's the freedom of the truth. Number one, freedom of the truth to correct old errors in judgment. That's the freedom of the truth. Because if you don't speak the truth, then you're likely not to correct the errors in judgment. If something's wrong, but you say, hey, it's fine, it's fine, it's fine, how are you going to correct the errors in judgment that made it wrong? So you can't say it's fine, it's fine, it's fine, and finally it turns out to be fine. Say, no. The only way to go from wrong to fine is not by affirmation. The way to go from wrong to fine is to figure out where the errors in judgment were by speaking the truth. Something's wrong here, finding out what's wrong, making the changes. Now it can go from wrong to fine. Here's a good phrase. Affirmation without discipline is the beginning of delusion. Now, here's what else the truth does. First, it sets you free to correct old errors and judgments. Here's what else it does. Helps you to set up new, easy discipline. To turn wrong into right. To turn lack into prosperity. To turn skepticism into faith. But in order to turn wrong into right, we must speak the truth. Because only the truth will set you free. Free to correct an error in judgment. Because here's the formula for failure, and here's the formula for success. The formula for failure, number one, a few errors in judgment repeated every day. We call that the formula for failure. A few errors in judgment repeated every day. Now, why would you repeat an error in judgment the second day? Reason, failure doesn't occur at the end of the first day. If it did, it would be helpful, because then you wouldn't do that anymore. But errors in judgment are so subtle because they don't usually show their results until for a while. But a few errors in judgment repeated every day, and sure enough, you're way off course. Now, here's all you got to do to turn that around. A few simple disciplines practiced every day. A few simple disciplines practiced every day starts to create success. Not at the end of the first day. The first day is the end of a new beginning. The first day. That you've started a new track. That you've started a new direction. So we must all speak the truth. So affirm the truth. Yes, affirm God is good. Yes, affirm life is full of possibilities. Yes, affirm all the truthful possibilities. But you don't need to try to trick yourself into saying something is okay when it isn't okay. Some people say every day in every way I'm getting better and better. And if that's not true, see, then we call that delusion. If it's not true. If it is true, then it's wonderful. It's fabulous. We should celebrate. But if it's not true, every day in every way I'm getting better and better. See, if that's not true, then it is an affirmation that's destructive.
Trying to prove people wrong or right about you is a cheap level of motivation, right, and it will wear out. In other words, not the lack of it, it's not the best type. People say, well, hey, Tom Brady, 6th-round draft pick. I mean, he's constantly trying to prove them that they picked the wrong guys. You think he's become the greatest football player of all time because he's trying to prove people from 20 years ago wrong about where he was drafted. You don't get elite performance. Tom Brady is where he is because he sets standards for himself and has massive goals and ambitions for himself, not to prove other people wrong. Yeah. And so I think it's low-level motivation. I do it too. It's the symptom of the same disease. So proving your family wrong or right is a symptom of the same disease, which is you are still obsessed with what other people are thinking about you and doing things that make you happy, that enrich you, to fulfill your soul. And so the irony about spending your life worrying about what everybody else thinks about you is that those people will never be thought about after they're dead. So they spend their life obsessing what everyone thinks about them, only to die and have no one ever remember them. Because people that are so obsessed with what other people think about them never really ever fulfill their potential. So once you can drop that addiction, whether it's friends, strangers, or your parents, and you begin to do things that fulfill you, that make you happy, that change other people's lives by your contribution, now you can be remembered. Now your life echoes into eternity, even if it was a quiet life.
So just affirm the truth. The truth is I lack some skills to multiply my income by 10, which I wish to do in the future. I need to learn the skills. Affirm that you don't have the skills, so that it'll drive you to get the skills because you want to multiply your income by 10. Yes, it is true. All things are possible to the believer. It is true. Errors in judgment lead to devastation. We don't just need the truth, we need the whole truth and nothing but the truth. Here's what we don't need: delusion. You don't need delusion in order to try to make something out of nothing. All you need is this simple little formula to imagine, because imagination is so powerful. It's the beginning of creating all things that we see. Then faith to believe it's possible. It says what? With faith, everything's possible. Without faith, nothing is possible. So that's a good study to make. Creating faith to believe it's possible. But now we deposit faith and imagination into muscle, into discipline. Michelangelo was a genius, but it wasn't his genius that created this famous sculpture. But his genius was so strong and he believed in it so thoroughly that he picked up the chisel and the hammer. And it was the muscle and the chisel and the hammer that created the sculpture. And without the discipline, there would be no sculpture. But if you take your genius, if you take your ideas and your inspiration and your excitement and translate it into muscle, If you want good health, you can study every book there is, and you can believe that it's possible to be healthy. But until you fall on the floor and start doing the push-ups, until you jog around the block, right? Until you start working on your good health, working and laboring. Labor pains, we call it. So add this to your repertoire of good ideas. New life only comes from labor. Now, some people try to create it with affirmation, but it doesn't work. New life only comes from labor. That's why we should devote most of our time to labor, because it's the miracle creator. It says 6 days labor and 1 day rest. Don't get those numbers mixed up. And here's why. It isn't rest that creates the miracle. It's labor that creates the miracle. And you just go right down the list. Labor creates the miracle of a career. Labor creates the miracle of a hotel. Labor creates the miracle of a fortune. You can have plenty of miracle. You don't need to engage in delusion. You just engage in reality. And here's what's real. Imagination, supported by faith, invested in labor, works miracles. The miracle of a relationship. The labor of my language produces the miracle of sight. Being able to see things you couldn't see before. If I labor well enough with the vocabulary and language that I've got, describing the value of my own ideas translated for you. Maybe it'll help you to see something today, tomorrow, that you've never seen before. So the labor of my language, the work, and lecturing is hard work. They say 1 hour of intense lecturing is like digging ditches for 8 hours. The intensity and the energy and the vitality it takes, right? You just become almost exhausted sometimes in laboring with words to get your vocabulary out there where it touches someone's consciousness so that they can see something they've never seen before. And we call that miracle stuff. I don't know how it works. You don't need to know how it works. All you need is a simple analysis like this. But the labor takes the idea, supported by faith, translate it into labor, and it starts producing all kinds of miracles. So now you can understand that you are a miracle worker. Would a miracle worker sleep late? I doubt it. Unique thing about genius. Genius has no sense of time. It's amazing. If you could have met Michelangelo and, you get there and it's like 11 o'clock, it's like midnight. And you said to Michelangelo, isn't it a little late? And Michelangelo would say, late? What's this late? What does that mean, late? I don't understand late. To a genius, it's not late. To the average person, it's getting late. But to a genius, it's not late. Say, well, Michelangelo, I'll meet you here in the morning and watch you get started. And you got to get there at 4 o'clock. You say, it's really early. And Michelangelo says, early? I don't understand this. What's this early? It doesn't compute early. Not to a genius. Because the genius is consumed by the finished product. And he devotes his imagination and his faith translated into muscle to produce the sculpture. Now, you can do that with your health. Health is just as valuable as the sculpture that inspires the world. Your own education, your own future, your own career, your own relationships, building a hotel, creating success, making a fortune. It's all part of the same scheme of imagination, faith, supported by labor. And now, all things are possible to those that believe. Wow.
I have helped people and gave to people who sued me, who lied on me, who betrayed me, who broke my heart and let me down. I have been betrayed so many times that when you don't betray me, I'm shocked. I'm scared to believe that you might be real.
If you got somebody that's dragging, that's going down the downward spiral, and you decide that you're just going to pour everything into them, well, then you're going to go down that downward spiral as well. And now you're not going to be able to help them. So I think you definitely have to take care of yourself as a person so that you have the platform to take care of someone else and help someone move in the right direction. Oftentimes when you think you're helping someone, you're really just enabling them. You got to detach. You got to make sure you're not becoming emotional. You got to make sure that you're seeing the person and the situation for what it really is. Not what you want it to be, but what it really is, who they really are, what they are really doing. And then when you're detached, you got to make logical decisions from that point of detachment to decide whether this person can be helped and how far you're willing to go to help them. And you got to remember, you can't be a hero to everybody.
We've all been used. We've all been taken advantage of. It doesn't feel good. And when you get used and taken advantage of or manipulated, it makes you stop, think, and start looking at everybody the same way. It makes you question any and everything and everybody because you were used, manipulated, and taken advantage of. You're doing everything and operating and coming from your heart. But unfortunately, other people have malicious, evil, and vindictive intentions towards you. And all you have to do is forgive those, but more importantly, learn from it. Experience is your highest truth. And I don't want you to ignore the truth. I don't want you to disown the experience. There was an open hand from your heart to help somebody get on their feet. And once you took their hand, they took that same hand that you helped them get up with, turned it into a fist, and tried to figure out a way to knock you out.
Sometimes it takes you a minute to process what to do when right goes wrong. You're not ready for a new relationship because you can't figure out what happened in the old relationship because you said, I gave my very best and it went wrong. And so I have lost confidence in my best. Because you left me with the notion that maybe my best isn't good enough. So I'm not sure that anybody will ever see my best again. Because I did it from my heart. I did it from my heart. And now I know what young people do not know. Is that right can go wrong.
People who are not your children, you are under no obligation to help people. You're not responsible for another adult's happiness, well-being, or welfare. You're not responsible for that, nor should you make yourself responsible for another person. Take that pressure off you. First of all, if they didn't have your number, what would they do? I always say that. You're her friend. She's not your friend. You have a one-sided friendship. So what you got to do is you got to even it out. Just when the phone rings, you know not to answer because she wants something. So don't answer. Here's the best thing to do. Stop using your voicemail on your phone because I'm going to teach you something. And do you notice that 95% of all your voicemails are a request? Let your voicemail fill up and don't ever empty. Don't you become the 911 in everybody's life. Just stop. Release yourself from the pressure. Now, her number, I would just block her number. I just learned how to block numbers this past Christmas. Oh, my God. Did you all know that? It's the greatest. Oh, my God. That's what I gave myself for Christmas. My life's so good right now.
Some of y'all right now are in relationships and friendships that you are clearly being used and taken advantage of. They're either going to come after your man when you let them live with you, come after your wife. They're jealous of who you are and all the things you have, and yet they're using you for these various things. Pay attention to people and who they really are. Don't manipulate your mind to thinking, you know what, maybe I'm just being a negative person. There's this thing called instincts, intuition, and discernment. Pay attention to them. Don't disown them because you will end up in pain in the end if you don't move on the discernment, the instincts, and the intuition about people, things, and situations.
Despite the fact that these are some of the clearest, most easily recognized elements of strong character, in the real world, they're also some of the most difficult to find. It seems it's always been that way. In ancient Greece, the philosopher Demosthenes went searching for an honest man, and he never found one. I've been fortunate. I think I've known a great many honest people. But if I measured that number up against all the less than ethical people I've encountered, I guess I'd have to admit that even in my experience, honesty and integrity are rather rare. Why is that? I hope to provide some answers. I want to start talking about honesty by looking at the exact opposite of honest behavior. There was a time when telling a lie was very serious business. I'm speaking now of the days before lawsuits and legally enforceable contracts. In those days, lying was a very serious matter. It was also very serious if you accused someone of lying. Today, a breach of integrity in a business matter might mean calling in the lawyers. But for hundreds of years in the past, calling someone a liar was the most common way to provoke a duel, at first with swords, later with pistols. Dishonesty was treated like a personal insult that demanded immediate redress.
You have to think. You can't just feel. You have to think. You know, even when you're taking care of kids, part of what you're doing is being compassionate. But if you're too compassionate towards your kids, then you do everything for them. And if you do everything for them, then they grow up useless and they never leave and they hate you and they hate everything else too. It's a bad idea. You know, there's a rule if you're working in a place like a nursing home. And the rule is, it's a harsh rule. Do not do anything for the people that you're taking care of that they can do for themselves. And so if they have to struggle to feed themselves, you don't bloody well intervene and feed them. You let them maintain their damn independence. And you have to be a hard-hearted bastard to do that. You know, to watch someone struggle like that. But you're furthering their medium to long-term independence and development. And you do the same thing with your children. Treating your children like they're endless permanent victims is a very bad idea.
Everyone knew the big problems that could result if you got caught. So lying to another person took a certain amount of, what's the right word? Foolish bravery, maybe. But there's no such risk today, is there? Some people lie all the time without thinking about it. Most people know when they're being lied to, which they may find irritating, but they just accept it. Maybe they decide to become liars themselves. In any case, very few duels are being fought. To explain this, I think we can make a comparison between how some people today feel about lying and how they feel about money. It used to be you either had money or you didn't. When you bought something and the bill came, you had to pay it or there was an immediate problem. There were only two alternatives. You took care of your debts or you were a thief. Some people would literally take their own lives if they couldn't honor their debts. I'm sure we agree that's not exactly true any longer. Many people don't feel the same kind of personal responsibility about paying debts promptly. And today, of course, we can put off paying for our purchases as long as we can make the minimum payment on our credit card. That pain that comes with having to shell out hard cash for something, the pain of maybe having to give something up in order to have this thing, we can avoid that pain. We can put it off indefinitely as plastic debt. Of course, there's going to be a high rate of interest on that debt, and the balance due can quickly mount up, but most people don't even think about that. It's a price they're willing to pay in order to have exactly what they want right now. There are many situations where it's painful to tell the truth. It's painful in just the same way that paying a big fat bill is painful. In fact, we even use the same words to talk about paying debts and telling the truth. We may talk about somebody's word being like money in the bank. We talk about being held accountable, about having to account for yourself, about being called to account. If you've done something that you're really not proud of and you're called to account for it, well, what does that feel like? How do you handle it? What are your options when you've got to explain something that makes you uncomfortable? Well, it's a bit like that moment of decision when the credit card bill comes every month. If you want to pay off the whole balance, there may be some pain and sacrifice involved. You may have to grit your teeth. You know that your life will be simpler in the long run, but it's going to hurt a little right now to pay off the new golf clubs or the new computer, or how about the 60-foot yacht? I don't actually know if you can put a yacht on a credit card, but I've certainly known people who would if they could. Gritting your teeth and paying in full can hurt. So quite often it seems easier to pay the minimum and delay the pain until next month. It's easier to float the truth of your finances off into a little imaginary plastic flying carpet. and sail it into the mailbox. Of course, it's not really a flying carpet. It's more like a boomerang that's going to come around and hit you in the back of the head someday. But as Scarlett O'Hara once said, I guess I'll think about that tomorrow. For the time being, it's gone with the wind. Let me give you some good advice about avoiding a bankrupt character. Pay your ethical debts. Keep your integrity in the black. Face ugly realities with the truth as soon as they appear. When you feel that temptation to hedge, resist it immediately. Don't treat it casually. Treat it like a grease fire in the kitchen that you've got to put out before it burns your house down or fills the whole place up with so much smoke that you can't see where you're going anymore. Because that's exactly what will happen when your ethical capital runs out. You just won't be able to see where you're going anymore. Here's another way that being untruthful is like buying on credit. They're both addictive. At first, they both go down so easy, and they leave you wanting more. Any addictive behavior offers a simple, short-term escape from a problem. But that escape becomes more and more complicated as time goes on. Lying can get extremely complicated. You've really got to have an outstanding memory to be a good liar, because you're always having to create more lies that are consistent with the one you told in the first place. I'm sure we have at some time been caught up in a dilemma like that. Shakespeare had it right all along. What a tangled web we weave when at first we practice to deceive. Maybe you think I'm being a bit tough here. Am I really saying that in every instance you've got to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? So if somebody asks me, how are you today? I'm supposed to say, well, I got to be honest with you. I have a sore finger. Last night I had a headache, and I've got to admit that my foot hurts a little. No, that's not what I mean. In fact, I think there are many times when some flexibility with the whole truth and nothing but the truth is called for, and I'll be discussing those later. Outright lying, however, planned lying, lying with an ulterior motive, lying for personal gain, that kind of lying is definitely something to be avoided. But untruthfulness is so tempting today, and I want to spend a little more time on it. I want to make a clear distinction between what I call foolish lying or silly lying or stupid lying and lying that is downright evil and poisonous to the character. Boasting, bombast, blarney, bragging, these are all the same thing. They're always floating around in the atmosphere, and they can affect you at any time like catching a cold. They're mostly harmless unless you start building a whole personality around them, which has definitely happened to some people. I should mention that there's such a thing as boasting in reverse, too. People who flaunt their frugality, people who poor mouth, people who are oppressively ostentatious in their lack of ostentation. This is actually becoming a bit more common. Keep an eye out for it.